In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Amen.
This is the last night for 3 years in which we will discuss the Ten Commandments. And my job is to talk about 2 of them, and then maybe, if you don't want to eat dinner, I can then sum them all up. The other day I was entering a class as when I wasn't teaching, and I think it was yours, but I may be wrong. The instructor said, all sin comes from the sin of pride. And when you think about it, that's true. Whenever we put ourselves in the center of the universe.
I'm cutting off your head, Father, sorry.
Oh, I'm a headless beast. Whenever we put ourselves in the center of the universe, nothing else matters. Now, Dorothy Sayers, in her introduction to the Purgatorial, says that all sin comes from sloth, which I always found to be a most interesting thing. Sloth is that we usually say it means we're not growing. But maybe the best definition is, where's Sergeant Coffee? In the Army, they used to have a thing that says, be all you can be. Well, we're supposed to be all that we can be. If not, we're slothful. We're not trying to grow. Now, my perspective, at least this evening, will be that all sin comes from ingratitude, not being grateful. I guess I like that because I struggle with being grateful. No matter how good I have it, I really think I've been shortchanged. I guess I should say that, should I? The 2 I have tonight is, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, and thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not bear false witness. One of the things I guess I should have said in my introduction was that all the commandments are there so that we live in a society which is just and righteous. If we don't have these commandments, and as Father the other night said, they're not suggestions, they're commandments. If we don't have them, we can't live freely. You know, for instance, thou shalt not bear false witness. If you went to Officer Moss and said, you saw him steal $100, and there was enough evidence, Officer Moss would have to arrest him. What would that do to your life? You know, for the rest of your life, you would have a conviction. For the rest of your life, people would think of you as a thief. All because, and I'm not picking on you, he lied. When you say something about someone that isn't true, you hurt them, you do indelible damage to them. I mean, girls, think about it. You have girlfriends who can be nasty, right? We used to call them catty. If they start putting a rumor around that you are naughty, you have to live with that rumor the rest of your life. And so, thou shalt not bear false witness is important to each and every one of us. Every priest in this room lives in fear that someone in his congregation will accuse him of a false accusation. And he will spend the next 2 or 3 years in the courts. And eventually his insurance company will pay them something. We used to have a priest here by the name of Father Jaggs who was from Windsor, and I remember once I had dinner with one of his parishioners in Windsor who taught at the University of Windsor, and this was 25, 30 years ago. And he told me that if you made an accusation against a member of the staff, they would just pay up to $25,000 because it was cheaper than a lawsuit. And so anyone could go and accuse the professor of anything and ask for $24,999 and they would get it. It takes me 3 days in a parish to make that much money. So bearing false witness is such a serious thing. It's cheating. Something related to this is, I remember reading a study 15, 20 years ago that 70% of the students cheated on their exams. You ever cheat on an exam? I did once, I remember. Once I let someone cheat off my paper. And I really regretted that because he could spell and I couldn't. And he got a better grade than I do. You know? But think about it. A policeman arrests you. He cheated his way through the police academy. Is that someone you want accusing you? Or you go to your doctor and he cheated his way through medical school. You can let him put his hands on you? Or you need a lawyer and you discover that 90% of the time he cheated. Would you want him as your lawyer? And I don't know about you, but I would never go to a dentist I knew cheated. I like my teeth, all three of them. So, thou shalt not bear false witness. The next is, thou shalt not covet. That means wanting something someone else has. And then it goes on to say, their maidservant, their ox, their ass. In other words, you see something someone else has, and you want it. I mean, you know, if I brought out my 57 Thunderbird in mint condition, and Elliot saw it, for a second, he might say to himself, wow, what a car. My grandfather always wanted those. You know, what would that say to him about what car he already has? It's nothing. I mean, he has that Mercury that he lives for. But if he starts coveting my property, he is no longer happy with what he has. He is jealous. And again, where does that lead? He would never do it. But haven't we had friends who would see something you have and steal it because they wanted it? That's where coveting leads to. But it also leads to ingratitude. If you covet something else someone has, that means you're not happy with what you have. I mean, who can I pick on here? You. You know, your girlfriend is dating Guido. And Guido is handsome, you know, he has that olive skin like most Italians have. And you're dating an Irishman. What is your response, you know? If you're spending all your time going, oh, Guido, how does the Irishman feel? Yeah, upset. You are turning down that which God gave you. No matter how wonderful Guido was or is, if God set you up with another man, that man is there to help you grow the rest of eternity. Now, this is true of all the commandments, and I'm supposed to talk about them. And if I remember, I'll look them up. But, you know, the first two, thou shalt have no other gods but me. Thou shalt not worship them, Then we have, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. All these things are putting God down. I mean, he just brought these people out of Egypt. He just brought these people out of slavery. And they're complaining. They're looking after other gods. Talk about ingratitude. Or they're taking his name in vain. A few years ago, you at one of the faculty talks said, whenever you hear someone take the name of God in vain, you make the sign of the cross and you say,
Blessed be God forever.
Blessed be God forever. Because, you know, that person was basically saying, there are other gods better than our God. Where am I going next? Huh? Honor thy father and mother. I'm moving around too much for your camera. Honor your father and your mother. Now, there are various levels to this, and we talked about them. Treat them with respect, obviously. Every one of us has a mom and a dad that leaves something to be desired. They are imperfect. I think of myself as a very imperfect parent. And I look back with regret because rather than be sweet and kind, sometimes I was grumpy and loud. Not sometimes, most of the time. And I worked too hard. But I hope I did a good job with the kids that I raised, all 9 of them. But took you a second, didn't it? But honoring your father and mother is more than that. In primitive cultures, when a person consumes more than they produce, you get rid of them. In the Holy Land, they would say, and I'm reaching this, well, I am a grandfather, aren't I? Yes. They'd say, Gramps, and I'd say, yes. You know, you didn't do a lot of work today. Well, my back hurt, but Gramps, you ate 3 steaks, 4 beers, and all those shrimp. We can't afford you anymore. Well, what do I do, son? You see that desert out there? Go for a walk. The Eskimos, if you study anthropology, when Gran and Gramps consumed more than they produced, they would put on an ice floe and they waved goodbye to them. Now you may think that's absurd, but I had a call, and I've told some of you this, from a woman who used to go to my parish. And, well, I called her actually, because she's been in Canada for 20-some years. Asked how she was about 1.5 years ago, and she said, well, Father, I'm in a special hospital, and they tell me I'm going to die. And I said, well, I'm sorry. And they had me sign this sheet that said when I was in too much pain, they would ease that pain. What's that called?
Assisted suicide.
Euthanasia. And about 5 months ago, I called her. Every week, no answer. She's gone. Her daughter may have taken her phone, but she never answered me back. Every life is significant. Then, of course, this is an important one, and I think Father Peter, thou shalt do no murder. Doesn't mean that if your life's in danger, someone's trying to kill you, and you kill them, that doesn't mean it's murder. But let me say something to you that's very true. I'm a police chaplain, and I've worked with veterans. And even when you have to take a human life to save other lives, you are never the same. Never, ever the same. Because deep in our souls, we know that life is sacred. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Now, people commit adultery for lots of reasons. You know, sometimes they're just idiots. But usually, somehow they think this other person will be better for them than the person they have committed themselves to. They're ungrateful. See how far it can go? Thou shalt not steal. I've talked about that. All these things exist so that we have all these commandments, so that we have a more perfect world. The world is imperfect because we put ourselves at the center of it, or we are ungrateful, or because we're too lazy to work for what we need. Remember the game last night? I loved it. We've had lots of games here, except for the time I defended the fort across the creek. Last night was one of my favorite times. You guys did a great job of playing the characters from Princess Bride. And even though every good character in it was a bit of a scoundrel, I mean, Wesley was a pirate. The Brute Squad guy, who was the Brute Squad, could be mean, but they all sought to do what was right. And when we do what is right, we live in a righteous nation. And when we don't, we live in an unrighteous nation. It's rather like that fellow sucking, what did you use the other day, 31 years of life out of you? A nation can't survive without obeying the commandments of